Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sustainable Supply Chain Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Nate. Nate, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Thanks for having me, Tom. Hello, everyone. I'm Nate Evans, one of the co-founders and CXO at Fictiv, a digitized contract manufacturer.
Great. And Nate, I guess, first off, could you tell us a little bit about Fictiv? Who or what is Fictiv? And also just CXO, give us an idea
Sure.
what the X in this case stands for.
Of course, happy to do all of the above. Yeah. The X in this case, like a lot of founders, we wear many hats. So certainly take on many roles, but really it's to focus on our experience. And that's what I'm principally responsible for. Is how do you ensure an end-to-end experience across our brand, product, and the service that we provide that's unmatched. So I like to obsess about that.
Nice.
Fictive, it's pretty simple. We simplify sourcing for engineers, supply chain teams that are looking to, purchase plastic and metal parts. So your entire mechanical BOM. And I'm happy to get into more detail about how we do that, why we're different. But at the end of the day, it's all about simplifying sourcing.
Sure, yeah. Do please give us a quick 101 on what it is you do, why plastic and metal, and how you got into that. Yeah, how you got into that as well. The origin story is always a nice
Yeah,
one to start out with.
yeah. Let me share a little bit about that. So my brother and I, Dave, we started the company 10 years ago. And at the time, we really saw this huge gap in the market for how do you go from a digital thing to a physical thing. And the traditional ways of contacting a local machine shop or going overseas, using other online services, or working with an existing contract manufacturer either were slow, expensive, frustrating. None of it worked at the speed that we felt, hardware needed to be developed at. So we came up with Fictiv really with this idea to simplify sourcing for mechanical engineers initially, and then supply chain teams. And the model is we don't own a single machine, but we've built software that facilitates and connects a highly vetted network of manufacturing partners around the globe. So we're in 4 different countries: the US, China, Mexico, and India. And we provide this bolt on supply chain effectively to teams to instantly get access to machine capacity in injection molding, additive, CNC machining, die casting, you name it. If it's a mechanical piece of your bill of materials, we help to simplify that sourcing.
Okay, lots to pick
Yeah.
apart there.
Yeah.
Let's start with working with your brother. How does that work?
I always ask, do you have a sibling?
I do.
That's, and would you ever consider working or have you worked with that sibling? Would you give it a shot?
Love her. I have a sister. She's great. Love her. Not sure I could run a business with her though. We're very different, and maybe that'd be a good thing because
Yeah.
we have very different qualities. So I could see she'd be very good at some aspects, and I'd be mediocre at some other aspects. And whether we'd actually be successful or not is a completely different question.
I think that's totally a fair question, and that's the same one that Dave and I had. But, 10 years ago, we were at this moment in time when there was an opportunity for us to work together, and we didn't know when that opportunity would, come again. So we seized it, say, hey, we're going to give it a go. And just like you were pretty much the same coin, just different sides. So my background, I majored in international relations, did a master's in Chinese. So I love languages. I'm a very creative problem solver for how I think about things. And Dave's your mechanical engineer. So, he's a very structured thinker. There's a right and a wrong answer for everything. But we complement each other. And what I'll say to anyone considering starting a business, trust in the early days is so important to focus on
Yeah.
the real problem, which is what problem are you solving for your customer? And so we leverage that to the max. We still do today. And in large part, it's why we are where we are. We've produced over 30 million parts for some of the biggest names, the Teslas, the Apple's, Intuitive Surgical's, Johnson& Johnson's, and we feel extremely fortunate and lucky to, help other startups and, companies that need help simplifying their sourcing.
Okay. And it's mostly plastic and metal from what you said at the start there. A lot of that could be done, I assume, with 3D printing. And you did mention additive as one of the options there as
Hmm.
well as CNC.
Yeah,
Are you seeing a trend towards more additive, or has that kind of you don't see a lot of headlines about it these days? So
yeah,
was that just kind of a flash in the pan, the interest in that, or is it advancing, or how is that working out for
totally.
people?
It's always evolving. Funny story. We started the business in additive for a
Right.
very intentional manner. It was, an easily accessible technology, very short sales cycle, all focused on speed. And when we first set up Fictive, it was really how do we help companies, engineers accelerate their time to market? And so we really dove into that technology. And today, there's still plethora of, additive systems coming online. What has changed though is that there's definitely more production use cases that people are trying to tackle. Those are, very challenging. And as the market's evolved, you're seeing a lot more specific applications. So a lot more, I'd say, niche applications to solve something in defense or solve something in medical or try and, bridge a tooling, lead time issue. So there's very specific additive systems that are really trying to capture that certain parts of the market.
Okay, interesting. And this is the, of course, sustainable supply chain podcast. And one of the reasons we're talking is because you released your sustainability and manufacturing report last September. It's a
Hmm.
few months old at this point. So we should have talked a few months ago. Sorry about that. My fault.
Thank
But
you.
how do you see how do you see the role of sustainability evolving in the manufacturing sector over the next decade?
Yeah, it's really exciting. We've done now our state of manufacturing report for almost close to 10 years now, probably 8 years. And this was, we'd had sustainability questions within that previous report. Certainly check it out if you get a chance. But our sustainability report in manufacturing was the first of its kind. And really, we brought this to light because of the increased interest, demand, and really the challenges that supply chain teams and engineering teams are facing to try and help demystify some of these questions. And so we've seen an enormous amount of interest in it. Just year over year, we've seen, over 123% increase in the number of companies that are actually setting carbon emission targets. And now 58% of leaders say, hey, this is at the top priority for me to actually figure out how do I develop a roadmap that solves some of these key issues. So that was
And
surprising to us.
sure, sure, sure. And that 123%, that increase in companies that are setting goals for their CO2 emissions, is that amongst your customers, or is that amongst their suppliers, or a combination?
A combination, I think. It's hard to really know the total impact, right? Because every customer, every, company has such a diverse network and such a large network and web of partners that they're connected to. And a lot of times they don't even know the full extent of all the partners that they actually work with. And so
Sure.
it's really it's a important trend and one that we should keep emphasizing.
Okay. And is it just carbon emissions that they're interested in, or are they interested in other aspects of sustainability as well?
Certainly, all aspects of sustainability, from packaging, in total carbon footprint, but also other social and governance aspects too of ESG. So, sustainability and the environment, a key issue, but certainly the social and the governance side, there's been a huge pickup in, understanding those decisions too.
And what kind of solutions are you seeing in place
Mm.
to help manufacturers reduce these emissions or meet those targets?
Yeah, it's a great question. For each supplier in this case, which I think you're talking about, has their own challenges. So
Mm,
do companies and OEMs, right? And so the first thing is about understanding, okay, frame the problem. What am I trying to solve for? Where is the biggest potential impact? And so a lot of our conversations we have had is around that issue. And usually the top challenge that people come with is, how do I influence or have control over my supply chain or have even visibility? You know, or I think it's around 60% of supply chain leaders really don't have the visibility, the transparency, or really they believe control over influencing their supply chain. And that's a real issue. So
sure, sure, sure.
if you're feeling alone out there, you're not. It's a widespread challenge.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, with 36% of manufacturers struggling to bridge technology and measurement gaps, what kind of technologies or innovations do you believe could significantly close these gaps and, propel industry towards achieving its sustainability goals?
Yeah, you know, it's I'd say it's actually almost too simple. I think in a lot of ways we overthink the problem. Industry 4.0, we've got to be completely IoT connected. We have to, figure out how to integrate AI and get all the machine monitoring. Yeah, that's all super great. But if you've ever been in a factory or visited a supplier in the US, you know that 65% of manufacturers are 15 people or less, right? 15 people or less. They're running on
Right.
clipboards, paper. They're lucky if they've got an instance of a CRM set up. Like we're talking low tech here. And so I think that's been some of the mismatch, up to this point is there's a lot of technologists, we're one of them, obviously, that wants to bring digitization and transform, businesses, entire industries. It's all around the ease of adoption. And so, how do you actually make it easy to create that reporting to help establish those, carbon footprints that allows everyone to gain that visibility? And so, those are really the key challenges. And the technologies is really, how do we collect that information in a, easy, simple, recurring way? And that can be as simple as a mobile friendly, web app. It can be an app itself. You can get more advanced, obviously, machine monitoring, actually understanding what your total energy production and what you're sending back to the grid to know if that's a partner or a supplier. I call it partner, sorry. It's out of
Sure.
habit, is that, are really have net beneficial to your footprint.
And considering, one third of leaders want to improve sustainability but lack the knowledge for a concrete plan, what steps do you think companies should take to build a solid, actionable sustainability strategy?
It's a great question. I I always encourage teams, leadership. You have to bring people along, and that's all about where you are in your own climate journey. And so I would really stick to that. And that comes from, a point of interest, internal motivation, right? You have to really cultivate that, not just for yourself, but your entire leadership team. So my advice is always, if you are on that path and that journey, it's all about how do you bring people along on that journey. And so I like to start at the vision, first and foremost. How do you get other people together, sharing ideas, talking about what's the type of world that you want to live in? From there, you go from vision to strategy. How does this actually affect and impact our customers? How can we make a better experience, a more profitable product? How does this help us, in our own internal goals? And then from there, you can start to develop the operational tactics and strategies that really gets to see a positive benefit. And so, a lot of times, I think too many supply chain leaders, it's difficult, they feel, to influence engineering, but it's so critical, I'd say, to really develop that strong partnership with engineering because 80 to 90% of waste starts at the design phase. And a lot of times they
Mm.
feel like that's out of their control, but it's super critical when you think about the full life cycle of a product.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask about that, about design and engineering first. How critical do you think early design and engineering decisions are in the life cycle of a product's sustainability, particularly now that we're seeing moves, legislation, regulations coming in requiring rights of repair? We're getting extended producer responsibility, those kind of things cropping up, and a shift towards a circular economy as well.
Yeah, it's more important than ever, right? As you've, highlighted, and we're seeing a lot of companies, take that on. It's so critical that you have that, partnership with engineering and supply chain, because whether it's material selection, which is a super critical component, if you're actually just thinking about your product itself and where are you playing in the market, right? Are you thinking about a highly durable product, one that's going to last a long time? Are you designing with reuse and recycle in mind? Are you actually thinking about the repairability, like you're saying? All of those are critical decisions that engineering teams are making, design teams are making in the field when getting, feedback from customers, but they're not always educated or equipped. I can tell you, I wasn't personally going through all of the engineering curriculum, but Dave has commented we don't have that in our education system, right? We're not teaching the
Mm.
next wave of engineers and leaders all the, not just advanced courses in graduate school, but what are the basics? How do we think about some of those decisions that we're making? It's all really on the job. And so it's super important to get the content that, teams need, the education, the training that helps drive that through your product.
And do you have any examples you could share about how early collaboration between engineers, supply chain teams, external partners has led to significant sustainability wins?
Yeah, let me think of one. Yeah, if I'm thinking of a specific medical company, in this case, one of our customers. It was a fast rising startup. They had this super innovative device on biopsies. And at this point, you have engineers working furiously against a deadline. You have supply chain teams trying to figure out how to scale, and they're not exactly on the same page for what their priorities are, or, moving in sync. And so a lot of times when we come into, engagements, it's about bringing those two teams together and looking at, an end-to-end cycle for what they're trying to achieve, both from, material selection in this case, the customer and the engineers were thinking about a specific requirement that they, believe they needed to meet for regulatory standards. So they spec a material that, was good. It had the performance that it needed, but it didn't necessarily have the sourcing, scalability, and the carbon footprint that might have been most ideal. And so when we sat down and we started to do the material review and analysis, we got input from the supply chain team, what was important, how they were thinking about being able to source that. And that's from there, a whole flow of ideas start to come on. Okay, what's the actual material that we can use to meet performance requirements, but also have as clean and green a carbon footprint as possible? And a lot of times the fear, what the engineer shared was, well, how am I supposed to validate that design with that
Mm.
material, right? That's usually the principal concern, which is a totally fair one. And in this case, we were able to help actually produce a low volume run of that set of parts with that material and compare it to an existing one that the engineer had selected. And so from that, they were able to see that performance, they were able to meet the standards, get a better material selection. And, then the supply chain team was happy, the engineers were happy, and we were able to, help support that. But a lot of times it comes down to time, cycle time, and being able to have that collaboration.
Sure, sure. If I'm a manufacturer on Fictiv, for example, and I have a particular carbon budget that I want to meet, or I'm thinking of it, or I want to reduce my emissions, can I look out across the suppliers on your system and choose based on the carbon impact of choosing one supplier over another?
It's a great question. So we've built a lot of technology to understand and connect to this, bolt-on supply chain that I mentioned. We really think about a small, highly vetted network. So 250 partners across those regions I mentioned, the US, China, Mexico, India.
Mhm.
And the model that we've set up is really one that's a managed service, not a marketplace. And there's a couple reasons for that, but really it comes down to how do you develop a deep amount of trust and understanding and relationship versus just a Alibaba, 5-star Yelp review, what am I really getting, right? That was one of the major problems. So you can't select individual suppliers on the Fictive platform, but what we do is we engage very deeply with our customers, understand, okay, what are your requirements? How important is green as far as what you're seeking to accomplish in your own supply chain? And then from there, we open up the full suite of capabilities, the capacity, the carbon footprints of all of our partners, and then start to develop, a custom solution that a supply chain team would want to achieve. And a lot of times it comes down like the quadrant of all
Mm.
engineering decisions: speed, quality, price. Right? Quality is table stakes for us, and then from there, it's how are you balancing delivery and price. And so, a lot of times it's about nearshoring because transportation and logistics impact is such a big part of reducing emissions, and that's about that's a price conversation ultimately.
Right, right, yeah. You can have any two of the three is the as the way they say it, isn't it? You,
Yeah, you want all three, but you choose two. But
yeah,
I as cliche as it might sound, like we're trying to change the game on that. It's you don't have to give up and make those concessions, at least not the severity of what they might have been in the past.
yeah. I think I first heard that triad referencing printers back in the day. You can have speed, quality, price. You can have two of the three, but never all three.
Exactly. Just it's like life is a funnel, right? Everything's a funnel. It's always the trifecta.
Looking at the global landscape, which regions or countries do you see leading the way in terms of sustainable manufacturing practices, and are there lessons others can learn from the front runners?
That's a great question. Yeah, there's as a cosmopolitan myself, studying international relations, I'm big on cross-border sharing and learning from all regions, partners. There's so much to share, and developing that community is, we believe, a big part of the solution. How do you get people sharing best practices? So in the US, we definitely have a lot of technical prowess and desire to really, solve this problem. And you see that with our manufacturing partners. I'm about to go visit a totally green, injection molding facility here in the next couple weeks, which is always an
Wow.
exciting front. They're, based in Vermont, of course, someone that
Nice.
cares about the environment, but they have a full set of solar waste management, packaging management, the logistics end to end. And so there are definitely a lot of businesses in the US that take that very seriously and provide a negative to net neutral carbon footprint for customers. On the nearshoring in Mexico, there's actually a lot of reasons why just inherently they're able to support large form factors of builds. So think tens of feet, right, and produce those types of
Hmm.
products and support the assembly of products that you might typically go overseas to Asia. They are certainly making a contribution in that area for reducing the logistics impact, which has traditionally been a big carbon footprint for customers and supply chain teams. So I would say each country has a role to play and a set of structural reasons why they're in the best position to support sustainable supply chains.
They've all got their own kind of strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. And so it's important to recognize those and, kind of understand them, evaluate them, versus trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
Okay. And what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for the manufacturing sector in integrating sustainability into their operations in the coming years?
Yeah, another great question. You know, yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't say leveraging technology back to one of your earlier questions, right? So much of this is a visibility and and a management of a network and supply chain. And so, I'm a little biased based on what Dave and I have been focused here for the past 10 years, over a decade,
Sure.
is really we need to leverage technology to help create a connected ecosystem and network that people can really connect into. And this is something I've learned more in our own sustainability. Like the biggest carbon benefit that we're really providing for customers and teams is the amount of travel that our customers don't need to do as a result of
Mm.
leveraging a platform like Fictiv or, other, digital platforms. But we really emphasize it in that, I learned that Apple, for instance, they are United Airlines' top customer. They spent over
Yeah.
150 million in travel alone, and
Wow.
Shanghai rang at over $30 million just going to Shanghai. So think about the amount of engineering and supply chain leaders that need to travel overseas just to be in factory, kind of boots on the ground and operating in that way, right? Manufacturing is it's a difficult business. People feel like you got to brute force it. I got to be in the factory. I got to be inspecting the lines. Yes, that's definitely important. But is that what you should be doing, right? Great executives always know, is this a problem that only I can solve, or can I really, delegate this? This is not my core competency. And so what we've set up is not just the technology to understand, okay, how do I track quality of a part, do that digitally, see that all in the cloud, but do I have teams in region versus flying people back and forth, And so our model is we really focus on having teams in region that speak the native language, that are in factories, inspecting quality, working on logistics plans, designing sustainable packaging, like understanding all those critical decisions that you would tend to send your team over. And we allow people to kind of leverage that talent in a way that traditionally hasn't been possible. Like it's it's hard to hire teams and manage teams, but um, through technology, through partnerships, I always encourage folks to ask, right? What type of partnership am I setting up with my suppliers? Do they
Mhm.
offer these types of services? Can I find ways to reduce my travel, the travel of my team, not just, for speed and, operational excellence, but like the efficiency and the impact from, travel itself?
Sure, 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 sure. For companies that are just beginning their journey towards sustainability in manufacturing, what advice would you offer them to help them navigate the challenges and capitalize on the opportunities?
Yeah. Read a lot. So read as much as you can about we're just one, but we provide a lot of content, a lot of resources at Fictive on how to design sustainable products and reduce, those early design decisions. They're so critical. I can't overstate that enough. And then do talk to your customers a lot, right? Do a lot of research and, build a lot of early concepts and prototypes. Fail fast, figure out really what is a high quality product and something that's durable that customers would be willing to pay, right? Versus something that might be less durable. It's a quick throwaway that people aren't going to really value. And so I think strategically for your business when you're starting, think about like what do customers really value and what are they willing to pay for? And that only comes through trial and error, getting physical, prototypes made, getting that in their hands versus jumping to some conclusion that might seem like the economics make sense, but doesn't have the same durability, reusability, longevity. that a lot of products can and should have. And so, making physical goods, yeah, it does have a carbon impact, and we need to all be conscious of that and, figure out what problems we really need to solve and, where we should focus. And then I'd say from there, as you get further down into the design stages, really focus on your partners and understanding, like, invest in the relationship. A lot of times it's difficult to build a supply chain. And so teams tend to have this fragmented network of, I need a supplier does this, and I need a supplier does that. And then very quickly you find you're left, I got 50 partners that I'm trying to manage and I'm over my head. And so take the necessary upfront time to really write down, okay, this is how I want to design my supply chain. These are the types of characteristics that I want my partners to have. Here's how I'm going to get leverage from them that they can actually offer, a value add leverage for me. So I'm not managing all relationships. And, from there, getting into material selection, packaging design, life cycle analysis, doing those types of studies to understand what the true carbon footprint is. But as I said from the beginning, start with your climate journey. Just like figure out where you are on there, and it's just important to start and continue that.
Okay. This is a very dynamic space, obviously, with regulations changing, with customer preferences, even boards' priorities changing.
Yep.
Where do you see all this going in the next 5, 10 years? What kind of, and where do, I mean, you're a CXO, you're obviously you're wanting Fictiv to be the best possible experience for your customers. What are your plans for meeting those aims for the next 5, 10 years for your customers?
Another great question. It's all about how are we delivering value. And so what's been really exciting to see, right? We've seen the consumer industry really lead the front on what do consumers really value and what are they willing to pay for. And so there's been a ton of adoption in our daily lives, right? Of how are we choosing brands that have a climate beneficial impact? If it's my sweater, it's my shoes, it's the packaging I receive from Amazon, right? It's all these things that we are now making those conscious or subconscious decisions of brand selection. And so as we see that starting to influence, right, B2B and the business world, it's a great trend. We should keep playing it up. What's important at this point now is understanding, okay, what's the value that sustainability can play? And I think the angle here is really aligning sustainability with efficiency in the boardroom and in the product. Through this inflation that we've, seen and all the cost cutting, so much of it has been a focus on, not growth at all costs, but what's the efficiency? How does it hit the bottom line? How is this good for business? And a lot of times I think we skip over the conversation of sustainability really is about efficiency, reducing waste in all of
Mm.
our set of operations. And when you align that with economic benefits, with the environmental benefits that you can get, and ultimately how customers are going to choose you, the differentiation for how you stand out in the market, those are powerful forces that really put sustainability at the core of how you operate as a business, as a team, as a product. And that's so essential to creating a durable foundation that will outlast and not just be a flash in the pan. And so making sure that you have that conversation, have the economic impact for how that lines up within the boardroom. That's something that, that Dave and I focus a lot on as how is sustainability good, obviously for us to reduce the impact and, and provide and contribute to the world. But how is this good for our customers, good for our business? Why does this make a difference in our business? And how can we do that better than anyone else? And so we feel extremely lucky and excited to, help tackle this problem because we need a lot more visibility and transparency on supply chains. What, supply chain leaders are saying is a key issue. and we feel like
Mhm.
we have the technology to help facilitate that. So figure out
Cool.
figure
Cool.
out how to align efficiency and sustainability is, put that at the core of how you work as a business.
Tremendous. Yep. Great. Nate, we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. Is there any question I haven't asked that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to think about?
I think we've touched on a lot of great topics. One that was just, briefly, but I think we need more conversation, and you're doing a critical role here, Tom, is the community of, supply chain and engineering leaders focused on sustainability. So much of these, movements and trends, right, it's driven by people like yourself. And so, I would really just, it's a call to arms on getting together as a community, finding and developing these, areas of interest, creating these sets of events, the content. How do we all get connected and work together to solve that? And so I think community is such a powerful force, and, one that spans right borders, like you mentioned as well. Like,
Mm, yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts too here, right? There's, so many great things that are going on, and you're touching so many important leaders, but we need to do more here is, my opinion.
Oh, yeah. Great. Well, thank you for the kind words. Thank you for saying so. Lovely to hear that back. Nate, if people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we discussed in the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. So you can search Nate Evans Fictiv, or just NW Evans is my LinkedIn handle. So up to that community point, would love to hear from anyone, everyone. What's been your challenges, solutions, create that conversation. So please reach out. You can obviously find us at fictiv.com. That's fictiv.com. And let us help you simplify your supply chain
And make it more sustainable.
and make it more sustainable.
Great. Super. Nate, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom.